Been a rough week for Michigan State off the field, to say the least, but on the field, have seen some impressive individual performances to this point. Not sure many would have had the Spartans with both the Big Ten's top rusher and passer, but here we are. UConn transfer Nate Carter leading the way on the ground, with Noah Kim doing some serious damage through the air. So, Pat, a surprise there. What has been your biggest positive surprise in the Big Ten to this point?
You know what? I'm impressed with Rutgers. I wasn't sure how much stock to put into them, beating up Northwestern in the opener, just because I thought Northwestern really might struggle this year. But then, hey, the Wildcats come back and get a big victory of their own, look good doing it. So now I'm looking at Rutgers saying, okay, not bad. And then they follow that up with an easy win over Temple. So through 2 games, this looks like a Greg Schiano team, doesn't it? They're number 3 in the nation in rushing defense. Lead the Big Ten in that category. They're number 8 nationally in scoring defense. They've picked off 4 passes. They've forced 4 fumbles. They haven't recovered any of them yet, but if you're knocking the ball loose that often, you're going to. 8 passes broken up, so they are getting after it and disrupting on defense. Gavin Wimsatt on offense has been pretty good. Certainly hasn't thrown an interception yet. That's a positive. And then running back Kyle Monangai had a great game against Temple, 165 yards there. And he has the block of the season, in my opinion. A just unbelievable stone-cold crushing of a Northwestern linebacker in pass protection in that first game. So I'm impressed with what Rutgers has put on the field so far.
Yeah, offensively, they're not going to overwhelm you, but 23 points in the fourth quarter against Temple to pull away is the most points they've scored in a fourth quarter in at least 30 years. So it's been a while since we have seen that. They've been pretty good, Anthony.
They've been exceptional, and the way that they've been able to do it, getting that rushing attack going with Monangai, like Pat's talking about, is huge for Rutgers, and for them to be able to sustain it is going to be a really big deal. We'll check the sustainability in East Lansing as well, though, and that to me is my positive surprise is Michigan State and their quarterback and what Noah Kim has brought to the table, because, Peyton Thorne was supposed to be the starting QB, and then just shortly before spring ball, he wasn't, or shortly after spring ball, he wasn't. Noah Kim ends up taking over that job there. There was the quarterback battle that plays out between he and Caton Hauser. But I was there calling the spring game, and I was thoroughly impressed with what I saw from Noah Kim. Didn't get to see all the line of scrimmage talent, especially on defense, on display for the team as a whole. But Kim leading the Big Ten in passing yards, leading the Big Ten in passing touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's got some zip on the football, some anticipation and attack. He's willing to try and get the ball vertically. And he's a guy who just looks very comfortable and confident in the way he's playing the position. So out of anyone, we talked about all these different quarterbacks and the big numbers that have been put up. Great performances from folks who've been added to the conference here. As of late, Noah Kim was in East Lansing backing up Peyton Thorne for a couple of seasons, getting healthy from a high school injury, and now is playing at an extremely high level.
He is 18 of 22 passing in that game against Richmond, Pat. That is the highest completion percentage for a Spartan since Kirk Cousins in 2011 in a single game. So he has really been good, and it feels like, up until everything went down Saturday night, it felt like this team was really kind of clicking on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, look, they came out of the blocks very well, and there were so many questions. After losing Peyton Thorne, Keon Coleman, you thought, gosh, is this offense going to have any kind of juice? And they have. They've showed it, and they've been balanced. They've had some explosiveness. They've defensively, they've been getting after the quarterbacks. They've been making tackles in the backfield. So I look at Michigan State and I say, boy, if you can just keep doing what you're doing with all the tumult around them, they can still have a very good season.
Yeah, you mentioned D's been better. They've yet to allow a play over 20 yards. Right. This is a team that was torched repeatedly last year. Now, if they can come out of the Washington game saying they still haven't allowed to play over 20 yards, that would really be something. That's a high-powered offense. We're going to preview that game in just a bit. Pat, what about on the other side? What about disappointments, I guess would probably be the word? Are there surprises where you thought a team or an individual would be better than they've been in this small sample size?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to leave Jeff Sims alone, the quarterback in Nebraska. He's been off to a rough start. I hope he can get it together because it doesn't look like they have many alternatives there. The team I wanted to talk about is Illinois, which we figured this was going to be a bit of a struggle defensively. You lose Ryan Walters. You lose all those dudes who went to the NFL on that side of the ball, especially in the secondary, and you figure there's going to be a step back. But, boy, it's been a backpedal back for the Illini. They are last in the conference total defense, last in yards allowed per play. They are just not making enough stops defensively. They're not. The run defense particularly has been suspect, and I figured they would go backward, like I said, but I didn't expect them to go from nearly first in the conference to worst in the conference on that side of the ball.
And when you look at the various levels of the Illini defense, like the opening game, Keith Randolph played pretty well against Toledo. In the second game, Johnny Newton, who didn't play well in the opener, then he responded well and played really well this last week against Kansas. But kind of each level of their defense came together so well last season with Ryan Walters as their coordinator. And we'll see. You think back to the first season, Brett Bielema and Ryan Walters came in. They struggled early and got lit up by Virginia, made a few adjustments, and then from there were able to right the ship. So still very early, but I agree with Pat. The Illini defense has definitely been underwhelming so far. I'm going to find some way to sort of, put a little bit of a crack, a fissure in what Michigan's done so far because they've been so exceptional. But maybe one of the reasons I don't see them as the most complete team in the conference as of right now is because the variety of weapons for the Wolverines, like Donovan Edwards. I expected more out of him. This is a guy that was getting some Heisman conversation coming into the year. It's easy to say it's maybe misguided right now because Blake Corum is the lead back. But when Blake Corum had to step aside because of injury last season, Donovan Edwards played at an exceptional level. He was a 5-star recruit for a reason. Not only what he does as a ball carrier, but as a pass receiver also. And it highlights how well J.J. McCarthy has played because he's basically had Roman Wilson and some fits and starts from Blake Corum, but not necessarily a bunch of other explosive playmakers who've shown out for the Wolverines so far. But Donovan Edwards with no touchdowns, averaging just over 2.5 yards per carry. I definitely didn't anticipate that coming into the season. You can blame some on an offensive line that goes 10 deep, so maybe the blocking hasn't been exceptional, but I would really like to see more oomph, more urgency with the way Edwards operates when he gets the ball in his hands.
I hear you, Anthony, there. And that's especially, look, the young man had some remarkably bold proclamations during the offseason here. Said he was going to redefine the running back position, wanted to be the greatest running back ever. Well, time to up the production a little bit there. He is a great talent. I am sure he will still have some great games for them, but so far through 2 games, everything that he himself kind of led us to expect has not happened.
36th in the Big Ten in yards per carry. He led the conference last year. Again, 2 games. You don't want to blow things out of proportion. You also have a quarterback who's completing about 88% of his throws, and you also have Blake Corum. So perhaps not quite as big a deal, but valid points. It has been a struggle early on.
To the point Pat made really quickly about Jeff Sims as well, I really hope Nebraska adds more QB run to their offense. I think that'll allow Jeff Sims to flourish in a unique way versus what we've seen through the first couple.
Not clear he's healthy, though, right now, with the ankle injury. So we'll see. It'll be fascinating to see if he even plays this week against Northern Illinois. USC, one of 4 schools joining the Big Ten next year, and the volleyball program getting a sneak peek. They are in West Lafayette for the Boilermaker Challenge. Gets underway tomorrow. The 6-time national champs will face both the Boilers and Illinois. That gets us to our big interview. It is USC Libero, Gala Trubint, who joins us now. And Gala, thanks a lot for taking the time. Catch people up on your season. So I know you got off to a bit of a slow start, but you played really well recently here, 4-4 on the season. What's changed here in the last few matches?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, first of all. I'm happy to be here. So yeah, like you said, we had a little bit of a slow start. I wouldn't even say a rough start, just a little bit slow right off the bat. But I think with every day that we're in the gym, we're picking up pace super intensely. Practice is always intentional. We're picking up the intensity of practice, being very specific about the little things that we want to change. And I think that attention to detail has been really showing up in the games. This past weekend, we went 3-0 against some really good teams. We took a 3-1 win against USC, which, again, was a Final Four team last year. So that's a big deal for us. And just figuring out how to close games in those tight situations is going to be huge for us. So, yeah, we're picking it up, and I can't wait to see where it goes in the season.
Part of the notion of what we've been doing this year is introducing Big Ten fans to some of the programs that are joining the league next year. And USC Volleyball, I mentioned off the top, has an incredible tradition, 6 national championships. For Big Ten fans who maybe follow their league a little more closely than they follow the rest of the country. Fill people in on the traditions of USC volleyball, and you were part of a #1 recruiting class in the country. So what attracted you to SC?
Well, apart from SC being one of my dream schools for a long part of my life, the culture is the #1 thing here. And I think that that's super clear through the coaches, at least it was for me in the recruiting process. And to them, it's important, the people that they bring into the program. Obviously you want a great team, lots of talent, lots of hard workers, but none of that means anything if the people you aren't bringing in are good. Good people with good character that want to work together, that want to fight together. And I think that culture it's only continuing to grow from here with people that we're bringing in as well. So that's something that initially drew me into the school, and being here now and like being able to compete in Galen Center with our amazing fans and people that have come to our camps, like that just means so much. And I can't wait to bring that culture into the Big Ten and have it grow even more with that addition. So, yeah.
We are anxious to have that culture as a part of the Big Ten. I mentioned 6 national championships. The truth of the matter is, though, it has been a while since USC has made a Final Four. We talked about you're an NCAA tournament team last year. You have this amazing group of recruits that you came in with. There are a ton of high school All-Americans on this roster. What do you believe it's going to take to get USC back to that level where you are a Final Four team and a national championship team again?
Yeah, there's a lot that it's going to take just because the level is so high right now and there's a lot of incredible teams. And I think that what it's really going to take for us is exposure and some experience. I think we do have a big group of girls that also just came in and a couple people that, are coming out onto the court for the first time and just getting comfortable playing with each other and almost being comfortable being uncomfortable, because a lot of times we're in situations where, we're down a couple points or we're up a set, but we're losing the next set, and just like being able to be extra gritty and like put in the extra effort to pull out those sets. They might not be pretty volleyball. It's not always pretty volleyball, but just being able to grind that out, I think is going to be huge. So getting good competition is a big deal. And obviously with our conference right now, it's looking really good. Teams like Oregon and Stanford, who are ranked in the top 10, like those kind of challenges are going to be huge for us and every team in the Pac-12 right now. So again, the Big Ten is going to be also a great opportunity for that growth. But in terms of this season, just getting out there and battling with every team, regardless of rankings or not, or, what it might look like on paper, just being able to battle and take care of business.
Tell us a bit about your background, Gala. I know you grew up in Southern California. Your father is a volleyball coach. He was part of the Yugoslavian national team before coming to the United States. Did you have any choice at all about whether to play volleyball?
Yeah, I would say I always had a choice playing volleyball. I wasn't actually always into it. I started off as a gymnast, a swimmer, ice skater, like very, very far from volleyball, but it definitely helped having the influence of my dad and my older sister in my life. Obviously, he played at a very high level in a very prominent volleyball country. So having that in my life was huge, and having him as an influence in my life helped me so much. Just kind of getting not only more experience in volleyball, but a little bit of an edge. Like that mentality and that attitude there is different, and it's not something you can see everywhere here. So I'm super grateful that I grew up the way that I did in the culture I did, and having him in my life specifically for that kind of influence. So yeah, that's what brought me here.
What's the balancing act for him, dad versus coach? How does he kind of thread that needle, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it?
Yeah, I mean, he balances it better than I could ever imagine. Like, I know there's a lot of people out there that have coaches as parents, and sometimes that balancing act is hard. Like sometimes they want to be the coach so bad, but they know that they have to be the parent. It's for him, it's almost the same thing because he's such a great coach, and it just has always meant a lot to me. Like he knows that the first priority for me is for him to be my dad, and that's never been a question, and I've never had to worry about that. But he also knows that I can take, the truth and the things that other people or other coaches might be hesitant to tell me. So again, I've always appreciated that from him, and it's meant a lot to me in my career.
I do want to spin it ahead in your career to next year. We've kind of alluded to this move to the Big Ten, but what excites you about that as a student athlete to compete in volleyball in this conference?
I'm super excited personally. I think the biggest thing for me as a libero, at least, is just getting exposure to like really good offenses. And don't get me wrong, like the Pac-12 is filled with really good teams, a lot of good offense, a lot of really big hitters, but just the energy and kind of the atmosphere and the size of the Big Ten in terms of just like their pride for volleyball, like is going to be so big for us. And I love playing in environments like that. And just being able to like, sometimes I envision like playing teams like Nebraska and like Michigan and stuff like that. And just envisioning myself like digging those hitters, like hitters that I've watched growing up or teams that I've watched growing up and like hitters and teams that I've watched like through their club seasons, and just knowing that I'm going to get the opportunity to play these teams and play these individuals in conference, not just if we cross paths in the tournament or preseason. So like a team like Purdue, like I'm super excited to play, and just knowing that that's going to be like a conference game is so exciting. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. Really excited about the atmosphere and the love for volleyball that's going to be had in the Big Ten.
Yeah, let me leave you with that. You mentioned playing Purdue. You've got Purdue and Illinois here over the next couple of days. Just give us a thumbnail scouting report on each one of those teams.
Yeah, well, obviously, Purdue, I know a few girls on that team just from personal like USA volleyball experiences, and I know Chloe Chicoine is one of my close friends, and I know she's been an absolute baller over there in her freshman season. And Ava Hudson, who I also know has been a baller there for 2 years now, and so that's going to be a really fun experience for me, at least as a defender, to kind of get exposure to them and see what I can do. And I know the atmosphere there is super exciting. I know they love volleyball here, so that's going to be fun. Illinois, I don't know as much about, but I know that they're a great team and is going to be another great battle in the Purdue gym, which is going to be interesting, a little bit of a neutral match, but we'll see. You know, I know they like to bring the heat, and yeah, the sport's going to be there for volleyball, and that's really all that matters. So I'm excited.
Well, we are excited as well. Looking forward to having those matches on our air starting on Thursday. Gala Trubint, best of luck this weekend. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, and looking forward to seeing how this season plays out for USC and for having you in the Big Ten next year.
Thank you so much for having me.
Saturday, a tripleheader kicks off with Wisconsin against Georgia Southern, while Indiana battles Louisville at Lucas Oil Stadium. Then number 25, Iowa hosts Western Michigan, and Rutgers faces Virginia Tech. And in primetime, second-ranked Michigan squares off with Bowling Green. Coverage begins with Big Ten Tailgate Saturday, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Go to btn.com/gamefinder for channel information in your area. Let's run through some of these top 10 games here, Pat. And let's start with the primetime game on our air. Again, Michigan against Bowling Green. It's the final game of the Jim Harbaugh suspension. He'll return for the Rutgers game next week. What are you watching here from Michigan in this one?
My biggest question is, what is Jim Harbaugh going to do on game day this week? Will he be on the chain gang again for his kids' game? You know, I heard he mowed his lawn. He took the kids to McDonald's. You know, when Michigan is this much better than the competition, I find my attention drifting to where is Jim Harbaugh and what's he doing. But, you know, for the Wolverines, look, they've done everything that you've asked them to do so far. They've looked good. They've been dominant. There have been no wobbles, no shakes. Not maybe as explosive and spectacular in some areas as you would like, but Roman Wilson getting in the end zone. 2 touchdown catches first game, 3 touchdowns the second game. He's kind of become the centerpiece big play guy for them now. And I think that passing game is probably just going to keep getting better and better as the competition starts to ramp up.
Man, as precise as J.J. McCarthy has been, it's hard to imagine it won't, Pat. I completely agree. And getting guys like Colston Loveland in the end zone, Cornelius Johnson in the end zone. But I think to one of the points that Pat alluded to as well, the potential for this ground attack of the Wolverines to truly become more dominant, more domineering than what we saw this past season. I think that potential is there for them also because, you know, the offensive line is legitimately deep. Can they open gaping running lanes? Can the explosiveness of Blake Corum, as he continues to get healthier and healthier, can that get back to the form that we saw from him when he was a Heisman contender last year? I talked about Donovan Edwards a moment ago. That's just the offense. The pass rush really got lathered up last weekend also. So to really impact the game on a consistent basis with and without the blitz, that'll really pay dividends for Michigan going into conference play.
Yeah, I am interested to see whether, kind of to Pat's point, do they become a little more explosive offensively? Remember, this is a team that averaged more than 40 points per game last year. They've yet to exceed 35 in a game this season. So, again, they've been really good. They lead the Big Ten in yards per play. It has been, obviously JJ is just off the charts statistically, and his performance has been incredible. But there is certainly room there for them to get better, and we'll see whether or not they can kind of refine things here in this game against the Falcons. Ohio State has Western Kentucky. Now, Ryan Day has made it official. I think we all suspected Kyle McCord was his quarterback. He said yesterday at his news conference, Kyle McCord is his quarterback. Western Kentucky this week, and then Notre Dame next week, Pat, in what will be one of the marquee non-conference games of the season. So what does Ohio State need to refine this week to be ready for what is a very good Notre Dame team a week from now?
Yeah, Notre Dame's good on both sides of the ball, and we want to see Ohio State be good on both sides of the ball. This is an opportunity to do that. Their defense will be challenged a bit. Western Kentucky can throw it around. They've got a good quarterback in Austin Reed. They've got a NFL prospect at wide receiver in Malachi Corley. Western Kentucky's a 450 team. They can get 450 yards. They give up 450. So I think the Ohio State offense could really roll here. They got Marvin Harrison in sync, got him going 7 catches, 160 yards last week after that kind of no-show in the first game. Look out. He and the rest of the Buckeye receivers could absolutely light it up, I think, against the Hilltoppers.
I'll be curious about Ryan Day's approach offensively in this game as well, Pat, just whether or not, because on the line of scrimmage, there's room for growth for Ohio State in continuing to enhance, to bolster their rushing attack. And it feels like that's been more of a focus for Ryan Day over the last couple of years to make sure they become more physical, more formidable up front. But now that he has determined Kyle McCord will be the starting quarterback, and that's going to be the case for the season here. One, how much does Devin Brown still work in the lineup, which he alluded to is still a distinct possibility that they'll roll him in some. But then also, in sticking with Kyle McCord, what does that end up meaning? Does that mean you want to attempt 50 passes in a game against an offense that can light it up through the air as well? Do you want to utilize this as an opportunity to truly let Kyle McCord showcase that full arsenal of arm talent and spreading the ball around to so many different playmakers he has access to? Or is it still more of a sort of condensed playbook, an offense that has run-pass balance? I believe from a championship perspective, that's what suits Ohio State. But as of right now, you would say perhaps this week, and definitively I think in the Notre Dame matchup, you would look at the opponent and say that's a more proven commodity that they have at quarterback, and we're not accustomed to thinking about it along those lines with Ohio State.
No, and that's the challenge for anyone who was going to be the quarterback for Ohio State this year, is just how high the bar is. I mean, the last 3 Ohio State quarterbacks have been Heisman finalists. The last guy was Heisman finalist twice. It would help if they run the ball better. I mean, kind of to your point, they're 12th in the Big Ten in rushing yards per game. They're last in the Big Ten in third down conversion percentage. So there's certainly some areas where Ohio State can improve and get themselves feeling maybe getting their fan base feeling a little bit better heading into that game with the Buckeyes.
And they're going to have to rush the quarterback without Jim Knowles needing to blitz as well. They got to get that right by Notre Dame.
Heading into the game with the Irish is what I meant to say. Let's get to our big stat, the other Big Ten team in the top 10, Penn State. Quick look here at our big stat, which is brought to you by Old National Bank. The Nittany Lions, one of 8 teams early on that's in the top 20 nationally in both scoring offense and scoring defense. They're the only Big Ten team averaging better than 50 points per game and giving up 11. Pat, that is pretty good. They're headed to Illinois.
Not half bad.
Yeah, not bad. They're headed to Illinois this week. We've already talked about the Illini. They haven't played great here out of the gate, but it should be a supercharged atmosphere. Let's look at this one through the lens. First to Penn State. What are you expecting here in this matchup with Illinois?
Yeah, I've been to a Penn State-Illinois game at Illinois that was a little harder than Penn State wanted it to be. And then obviously, you know, they had the marathon OT game in Happy Valley a couple of years back. But I I think that Penn State wants to go in there, line up, and run the ball with those excellent running backs against a very susceptible run defense right now. If you can do that and just make it simple in the road opener for Drew Aller, not put him in a lot of third and longs or possessions where he's needs to carry the team down the field, I think that works out better for Penn State. So I would test that Illinois defense, the run defense, strongly to see if it's as pliant as it was the first 2 weeks against Toledo and against Kansas.
The hallmark of Illinois' front last season in that historically great defense they put on the field was the energy that their defensive front could play with. And that's got to be where Keith Randolph, Johnny Newton, they have to lead the way against Penn State in that regard, in shutting down the run, to Pat's point, but then also in making sure they are rushing the quarterback and doing so in a way that just keeps Drew Aller on the move. He is more than mobile as a signal caller, there's no doubt about that, but to be able to get home consistently against an excellent Penn State offensive line will be a huge key for how the Illini can attack. And the edge, Gabe Backus, in his growth, his ascension that we anticipated this season, hasn't necessarily had the splash plays through the first couple of the games this season. So that D-line versus O-line, the Illini defensive front versus that Penn State offensive line will be a huge key for Illinois on defense. And then just playing smart. You can't have Taz Nicholson with some ill-advised penalties as we've seen through the first couple of games. And the team as a whole, just with penalties at really inopportune times, keeping them on the field.
I have 16 penalties, which is the most in the Big Ten. You mentioned the defensive line. I'm surprised at both lines of scrimmage. I mean, they have not been able to run the ball very effectively. Luke Altmaier's been their leading rusher 2 straight games, which tells you something about him. I think he's more mobile than maybe people understood or expected him to be. He has been good. He has made some mistakes. He's got some interceptions here early on. He's thrown 3. But offensive line looked like a strength to me when we were at camp, and it just hasn't played out that way at all, Anthony.
And to me, the point you're making about Altmaier's athleticism, his mobility, that's something that Barry Lunney Jr., that needs to be a part of the Illini game plan to see if that can serve to open up additional rushing opportunities for Reggie Love III, for Josh McCray, because now that folks have that on film, that Luke Altmaier can move, not only as a scrambler, but utilize that mesh point, some read zone, and see if you can, because the running game did pick up a little bit of steam against Kansas, and then they're just trailing by so much in the game, you can't really stick with it. But it seems like there's some growth that they can access in the rushing attack, and maybe you keep Drew Aller off the field, that Penn State offense off the field, if you can do that, if you can chew up some clock with that run game and the occasional strike play. We know that Pat Bryant and Isaiah Williams are both exceptional talents. Haven't seen Malik Elzy get untracked too much this year so far, but they have big play guys that they can access against a Penn State defense that's just been spectacular so far, Pat.
Yeah, no, they've asked Luke Altmaier to do a lot. He's been pretty good so far. I mean, he's, as you said, he's more mobile, I think, than some people had expected. Passing game, they've been looking for him to throw for 200 yards, 25 to 30 pass attempts per game. So it's not a spread it and chuck it. Let's have Luke Altmaier carry us with 400 passing yards kind of offense. That's not a Brett Bielema way to play, and that's Barry Lunney's not way to play either. So, can you get a running game from someone other than your quarterback enough so that you can have a balanced attack and you're not just dropping back and throwing it 40 times? That's going to be very important, and that means you got to stay in the game against Penn State for the long haul, not fall behind early.
Been an issue. 16 fewer first downs than their opponents through 2 games for the Fighting Illini. Finally, another game involving a top 10 team. The top 10 team is not in the Big Ten, at least yet. They will be next year. Washington, number 8 in the country. They've got a dynamic offense. We talked about Michael Penix earlier in the show. The former Indiana quarterback is a clear-cut Heisman Trophy candidate. Michigan State, under the best of circumstances, this would have been a very challenging game. It is not the best of circumstances, as we know, in East Lansing. Break this one down from your point of view here, Pat.
Well, I think this is all about, as you mentioned, Michigan State doesn't give up big plays. Washington lives on big plays. That is a great vertical passing game. Penix, big arm, and his receivers, big play threats. They're fast, they catch well, they make contested catches downfield. That's what they want to do. They're in the top 5 in the country in yards per attempt at 11.5. They lead the country in passing yards per game. So, can Michigan State get home with the pass rush against Michael Penix and make him uncomfortable, or is he going to have time to chuck it deep to guys that can really make plays down there?
And this is probably the first time Scotty Hazelton, Michigan State's defensive coordinator, has had access to that. I didn't get to see the D-line on the hoof when I was there for the spring game, but watching them through 2 games here, it's probably the most pleasant surprise that Spartan fans would have about this season, the way they can stop the run on the interior with big, beefy defensive linemen and also rush the quarterback from the edge. They've been able to get that done up front and not put too much pressure on the secondary early in the season, move some pieces around from the second level up front like Jacoby Windman. I mean, those things have worked out really well, and I told you how impressive I've felt Noah Kim has been early this season, and of course Nate Carter transfers in. So you've got weaponry. That's one of the things that really puts Michigan State in a position where they have a chance to compete in this game.
Right. Issue is, can the defense hold up? It has not held up the last couple of years, but to your point on the pass rush, they're tied for third in the nation in sacks, third in the nation in tackles for loss, so they have been causing some havoc to this point this year. We finish things up with our big picture, and it is never too early for the Heisman watch. Of course, Caleb Williams, USC quarterback, won it last year. We all know no one has won it consecutively since Archie Griffin, who did it at Ohio State nearly 50 years ago. Don't look now, but Caleb Williams is leading the nation in pass efficiency. Pat, and he has actually played 3 games because USC did play in week 0. How would you assess his chances at a repeat?
Excellent. He's off to a fantastic start, as you said. A 240 pass efficiency rating right now, which is off the charts. He's making big plays. He's making routine plays. He is running some. He is not running a bunch yet, but he can certainly do that. Escapability in the pocket, arm, excitement. I mean, he's got the whole package. Now, I say keep an eye on Travis Hunter from Colorado, who's playing 127 snaps per game going both ways. But what Caleb Williams is doing, he keeps sustaining it. He will be in New York, and he may well be taking that trophy home a second straight year.
I could certainly see him as a finalist. I'll be really surprised if he wins it, not because he won't be exceptional again. And the schedule they finished with this season, having all these teams that are currently ranked, like Utah and UCLA, who will be ranked at a certain point, Notre Dame, they've got quite a schedule to close things out here. I just believe there are so many other teams and QBs, storylines like Travis Hunter, to your point, Pat, that will end up sort of winning the day as you get into the month of November. So the closing finish for USC, for Caleb Williams, will have that opportunity there. But in the end, we've just seen that even when the reigning Heisman winner comes back, and is in some cases even better the following season, it's just really hard to repeat. And there are so many guys playing at a high level and who will likely continue playing at a high level even within the current Big Ten. A guy like J.J. McCarthy, it's a fresh storyline because he right now is what's leading the Michigan offense as opposed to that ground attack that we saw take them to a Big Ten title last year.
Right. It is the year of the quarterback, as we've talked about. We've mentioned Michael Penix. You can talk about Jordan Travis, right. Quinn Ewers, right? It just feels like, as Bo Nix, I know you get the billboards and all that. But I think you bring up a really interesting question, too. How good do you have to be for Heisman voters to say, I'm going to let this guy into the fraternity of one? Right. There's one person who has done this. Will I vote to add another? I think that threshold, that bar is really high. Great stuff from Pat Forty, Anthony as well. Join us tomorrow as I'm joined by Jake Butt and Joel Klatt.